Um, Terrific. Welcome, everyone, to the August 25th, 2025 meeting of the Hadley Public Schools. Do I hear a motion to open this meeting?
So moved.
Thanks, Ethan. Do I hear a second? Is that you, Christine?
Yep.
Seconded.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Terrific. Thank you. Annie, will you take us through any adjustments to the agenda?
Happy to. We will have the preschool handbook. Ms. Winter will be presenting that, the summary of that, and also a vote on the preschool handbook. And I believe those are all the adjustments to the agenda.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We will start with public comment. If you are a member of the public and would like to make a comment, please make your comments no more than 3 minutes and pertinent to something on the agenda. Please, if you're interested in making a comment, please raise your digital hand and we will call on you in the order in which you raise your digital hand. All right. Let's begin with Ms. Karen Sousey. Hello, Ms. Sousey, welcome.
Hi. I wanted to speak this evening in enthusiastic support for the proposed new cell phone policy change at Hopkins. When I first read it at the end of the school year, I was awash with relief and hope that an environment of teaching and learning can be restored at Hopkins. As an educator, I feel so supported and so heard by our administration's proposal before you. While cell phones were a problem before the pandemic, since returning to the classroom after online schooling, students have become attached to their devices in unhealthy and unproductive ways. These devices not only distract the student who has them, but also all the students around them. Their use is ubiquitous and unproductive, both in time, but also how it creates unnecessary adversarial relationships between teachers and students, which is not in keeping with our district's values. I personally want to spend my time teaching and helping students create and learn. I cannot do this when they can't focus and I'm playing whack-a-mole with technology, often confiscating multiple devices a class period. Reminders to put away devices are not enough. Students need that physical separation from these devices. They can't simply ignore the buzz in their pocket. As creative as I get in the classroom, I can't compete with professional algorithms designed to hold and monetize their attention. And I can tell you from data that I have collected over the past 3 years at Hopkins that our average 9th grader has the equivalent of a part-time job on TikTok or Snapchat. And many of these hours are being accumulated during the school day. Again, these aren't other people's children, they're our children. This policy is really common sense, middle ground policy that does not separate students from their electronic devices, but instead has them safely stowed in backpacks and away from easy temptation, but still accessible in the event of a true emergency. I believe that this policy will allow them to really focus during class, to socialize with their peers during social times, such as passing and in lunch, and also allows students the opportunity to develop crucial age-appropriate skills of being able to problem solve on their own. And I ask that the school committee please support the students and teachers of our district by passing this policy this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen Sousey.
I'm sorry, Mary, I know you wanted to go in order. I'm also aware of a teacher, I believe Christine Markowski has iPhone 7. She did say to me she has an appointment at 5:45. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, very good. I will take that out of order. I didn't do this for Karen. Karen, you might have lucked out if you exceeded 3 minutes, but I am setting a timer for everyone else. So if that is you, Christine Markowski, as iPhone 7, please feel free to unmute yourself and you may begin.
Okay, sorry, I'm in my car in the parking lot, but so I'm a parent or was a parent in the district also, and I've heard lots of conversations amongst parents and here in Hadley and in other parts of the country about what if we have an intruder in the school and I want to get in touch with my kids. And I understand that. We want to know what's going on. I get that. But my concern is that if we have parents that are texting and calling our students while they're in lockdown, and it's supposed to be quiet. What happens if a phone is ringing? What happens if it's pinging because they're getting a text? They should be silent, but they're not always going to be. So I just think from almost a common sense point of view, as much as we want to hear what's going on, it might be best not to disrupt them and distract them when they have to be paying attention to what's going on around them, and to not be heard as far as a ringing or a chime. So I just wanted to say that.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, next we'll hear from Amy Lanham. Welcome, Ms. Lanham.
Hi. I would like to speak to the same issue and second the words of my colleagues. I will try not to repeat any content of what they've already said. I think we already know the data is in that early cell phone use is correlative with increased rates of anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, cyberbullying, exposure to harmful content, sedentary lifestyle, poor sleep, impacts to self-esteem and self-worth, you name it, our students are experiencing it. One thing that I want to talk about is dysregulation. So even if students aren't able to utilize their device in our classroom, if they go to the bathroom for 20 minutes and experience a cyberbullying incident or some kind of dysregulating incident, when they come back to our classroom, they bring that into our space. So this kind of constant checking of the phone and the constant drama, teenagers have enough drama to deal with right in front of their eyes in the classroom. They don't need to deal with the drama that's also going on in everybody else's classrooms and in other schools simultaneously. So it is extremely disruptive to their learning. I'm so grateful to admin for addressing this issue. The faculty really finds this to be an important issue. We desperately want to do our jobs and teach these students, and we want to do it in the best way possible and the healthiest way possible for our students. I'd like to share that last year, a father in our district tearfully told me, "I have lost my son as a result of an addiction to cell phone use." This is not a thing that any parent wants to experience. And I will tell you, it is an addiction. We wouldn't tell a cocaine user, you can keep your cocaine in your pocket, but please don't take it out and use it. Our students are children, and they don't have the ability always to regulate that degree of responsibility. So I am very much in favor of a policy in which they're not distracted by it being on their person, by it going off, and that it can be stowed away safely in a different space. As a mom of a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, I will tell you, I don't have any contact with my children while they're at school. And if a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old can appropriately access their curriculum at their age and be socialized and spending time with their friends and, participating, then I think a teenager should have the same right as my 2-year-old and 6-year-old to fully engage in their learning. So I ask that you support the administration's recommendations for this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lanham. Next, we'll hear from Ruth Ann Fitzgibbons. Welcome, Ms. Fitzgibbons.
Thank you. Thanks very much for hearing me too. And I'm joining the team on support of I was thrilled with the way that administration did write up the policy. And I wholeheartedly think that it is the best thing that could happen for our students. And anecdotally, I have seen in the library, just going in the library repeatedly, kids on phones for reasons other than academic. So I just wanted to be here to support the policy and again say I've been teaching a very long time, and I can see the decline in engagement as a result of cell phones in general. So I'm hoping everybody will agree and adopt this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fitzgibbons. Are there any other members of the public wishing to make a comment? If you are, please raise your digital hand. Okay, seeing none, thank you all for coming and commenting. We will definitely take that into consideration as we proceed with the agenda. Okay, we are moving next to presentation and discussion items, starting first with the handbook language around the Mahmoud decision. Annie, can you take us through that, please?
Yes, for the school committee's review is language that the attorney has recommended is placed in both the Hadley Elementary School Handbook and the Hopkins Academy Handbook. It states, consistent with Massachusetts Regulations 603 CMR 2605 1, the Hadley Public Schools, through its curricula and instructional materials, promotes respect for the human and civil rights of all individuals, regardless of race, color, sex, gender identity, religion, national origin, or sexual orientation. In accordance with district guidelines, families may request information from the building principal regarding curriculum content and may submit a written request to the building principal to opt out of specific portions of the curriculum that conflict with their sincerely held religious beliefs. Happy to answer any questions from the committee on anything pertaining to the attorney's recommendation.
Great, Annie. Any questions for Annie about the new handbook language around the Mahmood decision? All right, seeing none, Annie, you need a vote from us on this today.
Yes, please.
Do I hear a motion to approve the handbook language?
So moved.
Do I hear a
Second.
second? Terrific. Thank you, Paul. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. We're moving next to the preschool handbook. And here to tell us a little bit about the summary of those changes is Lauren Wenner.
Hi,
Ms.
thank
Wenner.
you so much for having me. Our handbook changes this year are pretty straightforward. Again, we're updating dates and things. Prices, our tuition had gone up just slightly from last year, so we updated that. There was also some parts of the enrollment process that were clarified, things like giving a more specific timeline for families and what they can expect. So we changed some of our language around that. And we also went through the handbook and we tried to include as many inclusive pronouns and other phrases as we could. So using things such as families instead of parents, using things instead of she or he, using their, and just making sure that we are being mindful of everybody's family and their pronouns. And really, that's about it for this year.
Great. Any questions for Lauren on these summaries, the summary changes? Okay, seeing none, do I hear a motion to approve the changes as proposed?
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Terrific. We're going to move next to the HES handbook, and Jen Dowd, can you take us through the summary of those?
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Lauren, for giving a summary for the preschool. My changes are very much straightforward as well. We changed dates. We changed a little bit of language. We added a Q&A page, just the most frequently asked questions that parents have. When does this school day start? When does it end? Who do I call if someone's sick? How do I access the calendar and such? So I updated that. We also changed and updated our health policy. This was a change to align with Hopkins. We previously had asked parents to give us a doctor's note if a student was out for 3 days. We changed that to 5, knowing that some parents keep their children home, some doctors' offices won't see you right away. And so we just wanted to align that more with Hopkins policy, which is requiring a doctor's note after 5 days of being out. So we updated that section. Updated school closing information that to include our automated system information. Cafe and food program information was updated by Kelly Bryant, our food service director. That was on page 24. Our homework policy section, that was reviewed by all classroom teachers at the end of last school year. We just wanted to align our homework expectations and also add additional information if parents are concerned about homework or have questions, to reach out to the classroom teacher, which is always our best practices. And then we also added some mental health information for families to access if they are having a student that's experiencing some mental health issues, some resources and emails. And then finally, we updated our video surveillance, and that was to include that there are portions of the building that are video surveillanced, not audio, but video. And those are all the updates for the handbook, and I'm open to take any questions.
Great. Any questions for Ms. Dowd? All right, seeing none, do I hear a motion to accept the summary of changes as presented? And actually the handbook itself with those changes.
So
moved.
All right, I think that was the first by Tara and second by Christine. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Terrific, thank you. Okay, we are moving steadily along here, and we're next going on to the Hopkins Academy Handbook. April, welcome to come tell us about this. We did already go through most of the summary of changes at our last meeting, so I don't think we need to rehash all of that, but perhaps you could take us specifically through the cell phone aspects and do a little bit of a sort of voiceover and explanation of the data shared here about the cell phone discipline data and staff survey data.
Sure. Did you go over the attendance piece at the July meeting, or do you need me to address any of that either, the changes in the attendance language?
I'm actually not remembering what the attendance conversation was, so I don't think we talked about that. Annie, would you agree that we skipped
And it's
over that
certainly
part?
helpful for the public and the school committee. If you don't mind going through those two pieces, that would be.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll do the attendance one first. That one's a bit shorter, a
Great.
little more direct. So we've had some language around our attendance that included excused, unexcused, and exempted absences for a little while now. That's created a fair amount of confusion with families, but as we have been looking at our attendance data and moving towards applying an MTSS lens to attendance as we have other things, we're concerned about leaving that exempted category. It's not a category that exists in the real world with DESE. So it sort of gives a false impression that students can be absent 18 times plus an unlimited number of exempted times, which is not the case. So we wanted to reduce just that one category of exempted. So everything will be excused or unexcused. We will still maintain the medical note. We have a medical code when a student is out for a significant amount of time. So when they're in a hospitalization program or something of that nature, but we just wanted to align it with what DESE is looking at when they're looking at that chronic absenteeism. And we made that change both in day absences as well as in our tardies. So it doesn't really change a lot in most for families, and most families don't understand the difference anyway, because that was sort of manufactured. So we had manufactured it years ago to try and serve a purpose. It didn't really serve that purpose very well. So we're just trying to move back. And Hadley Elementary does not use that extra code either. So it keeps us in line with Hadley Elementary as well.
I have a question, if I can, about attendance before you move
Yeah.
on, because I just don't understand. So, so when you said the medical exempt, does that only account for large, like extended periods of time, or say you've got a chronically ill child who's out like on a weekly basis for whatever reason, they
Yeah.
would qualify for that on the medical basis as well?
So there's a couple different things happening in terms of an attendance code. If a student was out regularly, we would still just list it as excused. We use the sort of AMED one. Let's say they were having a surgery and they were out for 2 weeks in a row. And that's mostly just to let us know in-house that a student's going to be out for an extended period of time. In terms of credit, right, on that end, when students out for medical purposes or they have doctor's notes or things like that, that becomes important if a student ends up being out more than 18 times and we need to look at a waiver, right? So that's the sort of thinking around that piece of it. But, you know, that obviously doesn't happen all the time, luckily.
Right.
But before, with the way it was, it kind of gave them the impression that they could be out 18 times plus another whole chunk of times, and that there wasn't any kind of a negative impact. And so we're just trying to adjust that to keep it clearer for everybody and in line with what DESE is looking at.
So we still work with families in the event that we have a child who has some sort of illness in some form that needs
Correct.
work. We'll work
Yep.
with that family. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't change any of those policies or procedures around that. It's just more of a language piece.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions about this specific aspect, the attendance aspect? All right, April, you want to continue?
Sure, thanks. So in terms of the cell phone, I appreciate everything that the teachers have said. That's very helpful, and it's great to hear their perspectives. Obviously, they talk a lot at staff meetings as well, and they have a lot of different experiences. There's some commonality in those, and some that I can touch upon and share the sort of administrator point of view too. I think over time, we've seen a sort of consistent, since we've been tracking it, I should say, 15 to 25% of all referrals being cell phone referrals. Those referrals are also always within the top 3 of all behaviors that are being referred. And we have, as we've mentioned before, believe that those also might be a little bit underrepresented. So teachers have sometimes said, right, they have, given a warning and then a student has put it away. And so really each time that should be referred because they're not supposed to have it out without permission at all. I would also say too that it can be underreported what we've been seeing this past year at an increasing rate. And I tried to address it in both versions of the policy is students realizing that they could refuse to turn over their phone and just take a detention and move on in life. And so that's been getting labeled as refusal to follow an adult directive. This year, we're going to include both codes because we believe our new system, PowerSchool, separates those. School Brains used to put those together. And so that created a different kind of data problem because it created this whole new category and we couldn't accurately pull that apart. We don't think that's a problem in PowerSchool, so we are going to start listing those both together. But those instances we were listing as refusal to follow adult directive, right, as the primary thing you were giving the consequence for. And so the either version of the policy tries to address, like, you can't just say no and take an hour detention and keep your phone and move on in life, that there needs to be a larger consequence than that for refusing to comply with the policy. Staff have continually reported concerns around cell phone use in terms of lost instructional time, in terms of the conflict that it creates between them and students. There were some surveys that are attached here, and I tried to include what was relevant. So the one that was more recent is the first one, the staff survey from June, where the majority of the staff did vote that they wanted to have the middle school policy. There's some questions about the hallway, which you might notice. The hallway and the bathrooms, which I forget, one of the teachers mentioned the bathrooms, I think it was Amy, are often a point of contention with high school students because they might be in the middle of class and then on their way somewhere. In our approach, we're trying not to, attack students every time we see something. And so we try to give them the benefit of the doubt about when they can and cannot be on their phone if we're not in class with them. But that's obviously a challenge. And you have many students looping and wandering the halls to be on their cell phones because they can't be on them in class. And so that's a sort of regular thing that you see. I have to call down to the teachers, hey, Bob's on his phone down by the gym. Is that where Bob is supposed to be? And then they have to write him up for doing that. And so no one really wants to spend their time doing those things. And so they were looking for a stricter cell policy and a stricter hall policy. The middle school policy resolves that issue because in the middle school policy, they shouldn't be on their phone from 7:30 to 2 unless they have very specific ability to use it within a classroom. And in both policies, I clarified that students should just not be on it in the hall or bathroom, but certainly the middle school policy makes that easier where it's just like not even a discussion point for people. And so that was a bit of what came up in the last survey. Previous to that, in the fall, there was a survey just around the Q1 data and whether or not people felt like that was a problem, which you can see and hear that they did. Majority, again, agree that it was a problem. And so that was this past fall at the beginning of the year. And if you go further, I'm not going to read through all of them. I know you guys have this in advance. We have one that goes back to 22-23. And so that was the year after the school committee decided not to move forward with Yonder. And we implemented the revised policy to kind of see what people were thinking at that time and whether or not restricting that initial usage was helpful, which people did agree with. And certainly where we're kind of at now is we did that sort of initial restricting of it, but it's popping up in some places, and we're seeing a middle school policy that's effective. So when you look at the data around the number of referrals in the grade level, it's significantly less at the middle school level than it is at the high school level. And a big piece of that is that they have two different policies. Today at the staff meeting, a lot of staff talked about, what do we do about the earbuds and the watches and all those other pieces too, which the current policy allows high school to have that and middle school not to. And that presents, in and of itself, a whole other difficulty. So on our end, we're really advocating for a policy that's streamlined. We feel like the middle school policy is effective. We're concerned for all the reasons the teacher said about, student engagement and the impacts of cell phone use while they're at school. Sometimes their parents are contacting them about real things. Sure. They have the ability when they need to check that. They all have a computer that they can check as well. They have a one-to-one device in the school. They can call the main office. Most of the time, they're using their phones for other things, for games, for YouTube, to text their friend, to go on Snapchat. I mean, we've had several, conduct issues with cell phones within the school as well. So for us, it's a no-brainer to move forward. I know it feels like a big adjustment for people, but honestly, the middle school has worked really, really well having this policy for the last couple of years. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I think you're muted, Humira.
Sorry about that. I am operating on an iPad, which is an adjustment for me versus my usual laptop. So not everything is everywhere that I'm used to. Anyways, thank you. Let's start with questions for April from my colleagues on the school committee about the data presented.
And just ask quickly, can you explain, April, you made a comment that they have their computer and they have a one-to-one communication method. What's that?
Well, we're a one-to-one school, so all students have a computer, whether it's a school Chromebook or they can
I see what you
bring in
mean.
their own device. Yeah, so I mean, if a parent really needed to get a message to a kid, they're on their email pretty regularly, so they could check that as well.
I see. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Are we having this kind of cell phone discussion right now included, right? Because the policy change or the handbook change would include the policy. So it's kind of together, right?
Well, we approved all handbook changes minus the
that's
cell
right.
phone policy. So we're
That's
good to
right.
go on the handbook, period. What we are asking questions about of April right now is the data that she presented.
Thanks. I forgot that we had approved.
No problem. We'll deliberate as a team after questions about the data.
So I guess the only question that I have, and I'm trying to scroll through, I should have printed this out. I'm looking at the questions from year to year. And did we change the questions we asked year to year, or did you just not include some of those highlights? So
no, they weren't the same questions every year.
Okay, I find it, the only reason I ask that is I found one, and now I'm trying to find it again, where it said, so back in the beginning when we first started this discussion a few years back, 28 responses. I don't know how much staff that includes in our high school. Were in favor of the Yondr pouches, but then I saw a response, and now I'm trying to find it again quickly. And it was that, here it is. Do we believe we should follow the current expectations this year? They can have them at lunch, breakfast, and passing in classroom, yada, yada. And it was only 54%. And that was from 24-25, right? And so I guess it would have been interesting to be able to see the continuity and changes of answers, because I feel like, at least for me, that would help me understand kind of the trends. Like, it's hard to follow the trends. So I'll tell you right off the bat, years ago, I was in support of no cell phones in school from the get-go. But I find it hard when we don't ask them the same questions to track the changes from year to year to understand if there's a, you know, how teachers feel about certain things. So if we don't ask them again, are they okay with it? You know, breaks, etc. But then we
I
say
had the
it's
same.
getting worse. It's just hard.
I had the same concern, Tara. I was looking for the analogs so that
Yeah.
I could see what changed. And it felt like there was, like some of the questions felt like it was leading people to a certain response. There was, you know, it was like a fait accompli in how it was presented. And I think that we should really consider how we're, building surveys and asking, what kinds of questions we're asking and how we're asking that year after year. I think that's really important.
Yeah, so can I just respond to that?
Sure.
So I hear you guys if you want the same exact questions asked. I appreciate that feedback. Some of these questions were also about tweaking and revising the policy as we were living it, right? Which was a fresher policy. So that's why you'll see some of those questions about that, like you just referenced, Tara, was really more about trying to get clarity. There was, I must not have found it in here because I don't know that, I don't think it's in there. I know at one point, or maybe it is in there, I had to ask questions about the earbuds, for example. So we made a change at one point to allow students to use the earbuds in high school when originally they were not allowed to. And so there are questions sometimes that aren't the same question because we're trying to figure out the policy as we go and we're living that within the year. I can say, whether or not you see it in these charts, that I'm 100% confident the staff have majority wanted restricted cell phone use the entire time since they asked for Yondr pouches. They've had different discussions about whether or not it should be in their locker or kept in a thing in the front of the room or, whatever, or just not in the school at all or in a Yondr pouch or whatever those things may be. But they have been very clear about that.
So I think it's still like, I guess going forward, right? So like if this policy is to get approved, going forward, I would imagine that we would still want to track some of these things. Like we should be seeing students more focused. We should see less, not commotion, because we want children to socialize with each other, right? But we should see less discipline reports, since a lot of them that we're noting in these reports are that they're related to cell phones. So I personally would like to continue to see the data from school year to school year to note those improvements so that we know that the changes that we are making and implementing are actually having an impact on our students' learning. I don't know how you measure kind of the social impact of it. That feels a little subjective, but at least objectively with your disciplines. And then I guess I do still feel, and I think maybe extrapolate it to kind of any survey that we do, it is still hard to track those changes if we're not kind of using at least a baseline consistency in how we're asking and what we're asking. I think we talked about this a few years ago too at one of our retreats, kind of like Annie had brought up a bunch, and gosh, I forget the context in which it was, but about leading questions. And we had a whole bunch of different categories that we were asking and making sure that we were asking one, the question that we wanted answered, but two, in not a leading way. So asking it consistently is helpful. And then it allows us to be like, oh yeah, last year they said this, and now look how much worse it is this year. And I can appreciate the changes along the way. But still, if there were a baseline of 5 questions, like the 5 most important things, or, this arbitrary number that we asked every time, we could say, okay, we see this is getting worse. Now you've asked more pointed and directed questions in regards to those 5 questions, showing that increase in the problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
Just easier to track it and understand. But all of you here obviously makes a good presence, and I appreciate you all here. I don't have any other questions about the data.
April, I do have a question about a specific data point, and actually this was, just the last academic year, so I don't consider this to be eons ago. The question was, sort of respond to this protocol suggestion. Students will no longer be allowed to use cell phones during class, and you wanted to know from folks whether they strongly agreed and agreed, or disagreed or strongly disagreed. And when I add up the disagreed and strongly disagreed, I get 9 people out of 22 versus 12 people. So 12 people saying I strongly agree we should take them away, and 9 people saying I strongly disagree or disagree that we should be taking them away. So as someone who, I mean, and I, all the folks who have spoken today, I love and adore and respect, and have their frequent flyers in terms of like my presence in front of me, making their viewpoints known. I know there are a whole bunch of other people who don't necessarily come out and are vocal. I also imagine if you're in the minority, 9 to 12, that you might be a little bit reticent to come out and say something that sounds like it's not a unified response. But if you were to represent your 9 constituents, what would they say? Why would they be strongly disagreeing?
Sure. So let me just clarify what that's in reference to. That question is actually not different than the old or current proposed policy. So students in the current policy, right, which is the old policy, but the current one versus the proposed one are all able to use their cell phones in class with permission. This question was asking if they should not be able to use their phone ever and take it out at all, right? So you do have teachers a little bit more split on that, because there are some teachers who use cell phones for educational purposes within their classroom. So the math department, for example, has a new set of textbooks that come with videos. They use their QR codes, they scan those with their phone, and they watch those videos. So there are certainly times, whether it's an educational reason or Susan Duncan gave the example, she has strategies for learning at the end of the day. They find out there's a canceled soccer game. She has all of the kids take their phone out at the same time and text their parents about that thing. So that's the kind of thing that that's actually asking, would be saying, is this still okay? Or do you want 0 of that, right? And so you do see staff more conflicted about that particular question. And any of the versions of the policy in front of you, whether it's the exact old policy, my revised version of the old policy, or the proposed new policy, allow for that still. So the policy that we're proposing doesn't stop that. It just stops students' ability to use it at free will at lunch, in the hallway, in the bathroom, or at breakfast time. They're not supposed to be using it in the classroom already without permission.
But they might need to have it on their person in case the educator that they're interacting with asks them to pull it out to do something.
Or in their backpack where they keep all their
Right,
other
it wouldn't be
things.
on their person, it'd be in their backpack.
Unless it was the PE teacher asking them to pull out their phone to do something. You might not have your backpack with you in every classroom setting, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess probably not in PE. I'm not sure that's the most likely spot to need a phone, but in theory, yes.
Yes. Okay.
April, can I ask about on that most recent survey, is the first pie chart and the second one, or the fourth one? So the first pie chart says Q1 data, respond to the following statement: cell phone use is a problem at Hopkins. So you have about 79% saying they agree or strongly agree. So 79% say it's a problem.
Yep.
But then the fourth one says our cell phone protocols are working well. And you only have 60 people disagreeing with that. So you have some people that strongly agree with that it's working well, even where you didn't have anybody strongly disagree that the cell phone use is a problem. So only 20% disagreed, but nobody strongly disagreed. So it's a problem, clearly, according to the majority. I'm just trying to reconcile those two pie charts. Do you see any discrepancy? Or is it just sort of noise in the data?
Let me look at it a second to follow what you're saying. Hold on.
Well, why is the fourth? If you had 79% of people saying it's such a problem,
yeah,
you only have 60% people. You have only 60% saying they disagree. The policies are working well. So you have more people saying the policies are working well, while you have strong contingency saying it's a problem.
I mean, I guess I think, and obviously everyone has their own opinion. I mean, I think a policy can be working well at the beginning, right? As you're sort of working through that and you can see that something is a problem, but there could also be a policy that could work better, right? So it was working better than what we had in the past. It was definitely working better than that.
Right.
And I would say too, typically those things work a little bit better at the very beginning, right? So educators talk a lot about how kids come back and they're fairly compliant. And, you know, we were just talking about this today. Hopefully we wouldn't have to have an office detention or need anyone on the schedule for a couple of weeks, because generally they'll follow those rules a little bit more at first. And that was in the first quarter. But, you know, also it depends on, which I'm not sure because I don't have it in front of me, how many of those teachers were like middle school versus high school who also
Right.
answered that question. And I don't have that separated out here.
Gotcha.
I apologize for
Okay.
that.
I
Because
was
again,
trying to
those are
get
two
at,
different policies. So to Tara's point, getting a little bit better at asking some of those questions for everybody's could be helpful.
okay.
And I think you made an important point. Sorry, Paul, I didn't mean to cut you off if you had something else
No,
to
go
add.
ahead. I'm done. I'm done.
I think you made an important point too that I think we talked about a few years ago, is exactly what kids, they start school and they start really strong. And by the end of the year, it's a little more laxadays. So I think when we talked about it years ago, kind of tracking through questionnaires to teachers, what it looks like in the beginning of the year versus the end of the year. So it would still be interesting to see going forward, whatever the cell phone policy looks like, what it looks like at the start of the year versus the end of the year. Because if we're not noticing any changes from year end to year end to year end, then I mean, we need to look at something else besides cell phones as what's going on. How can we improve focus, attention, etc. Still useful.
I have a question about the teasing out of term one. I'm assuming that that was the fall quarter in 24-25, and then a lot of the questions related to that data point specifically, whereas the average of that entire academic year was, I think, 16%. Can you tell me what was happening in that first quarter that you would attribute that to?
Sadly, I probably can't. I was pretty close to giving birth at that point. I don't. I mean,
That
it
could
was
be a
like
reason. I
usual
mean,
as
Fair
far
enough.
as
new
I know.
principal, a new principal in the house could be a reason. I know there was a lot of, I think there were a lot of
Yeah.
substitutes that quarter too, I think.
I don't honestly, I don't know that there was anything out of the ordinary happening in that quarter. You know, I know the surveys are important and asking teachers some different questions. I would say that even survey data is, you know, pretty subjective. I think that looking at some of the data that came out of PowerSchool in terms of the actual numbers is a little bit interesting for me, and looking at especially grade levels, the percentage of students who had those cell phone referrals, some grades having half of their grade had those. So I think some of that too is some of those kids get older that have some of those significant addictive problems that Amy mentioned. We can see those patterns too throughout the years as we're looking at that data. I know there were some questions too about that. When we look at the all of the conduct data, including cell phones, at our PBIS meetings that we hold, and try to come up with different, you know, grade level or small group or individual interventions around those types of things, which is also how we try to treat cell phone use, right? We got rid of the policy previously where parents had to come pick it up because we felt like it gave an unfair burden to parents. And we got rid of a lot of our punitive consequences around cell phones, right? The main consequence is you lose it for the day and then you pick it up at the end of the day. And then if it's repeated, that signals to us that there's a problem. And then that's where we're bringing in the family to try to figure out what's our problem and how do we comply with this policy. So, you know, on my end, I think I can't tell you anything that was specific. I don't know if Annie remembers anything
Well, not
special
so
that
much
was
that.
happening.
One thing
but-
I would offer, I'm not saying this is the reason, but one thing I would offer, I believe, let me make sure I'm understanding the question. What might we attribute to the fact that in quarter one or term one, excuse me, the percentage referred for cell phone violations was 25%, whereas over the course of the year it was 16%. One thing I would assume is that over the course of the year, the denominator is larger. So it is likely that once the denominator got larger, that the percentage of cell phone infractions as percentage of total infraction went down. I'm not saying that's what it is, but that could be what.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it could be too, it could be a student who left the district, who was there in quarter one, who wasn't there later, who had a problem with their cell phones. You know, we'd have to look at that a little bit more. I think for me, whether it was 15% or 25%, again, it's always sort of one of those top conduct pieces, right? So we're just always trying to reduce, right? Just like we're dealing with, as I said, MTSS And attendance, we're trying to reduce our chronic tardies because that's one of our other main referrals that we have are our tardies. So we're trying to address all of those things.
Got it. Yeah, I found that interesting because so many of the questions, I think, related back to that specific quarter, right? Based on Q1 data, please respond to the following statement. So they were all relating back to this data point that seemed to be artificially high. Could have been because of one student who was there who was no longer there later. But all things hinge on that one quarter's data in terms of the questions that were asked. All right, are there any other questions about the data? I actually have a question not about the data, but rather about the punishment, what it is now, what's in the policy today, and what you're proposing will happen to students if they are caught with a cell phone.
Sure. I would say it's a very, so there's not really a difference in terms of a consequence just for the cell phone use itself. So in the proposed policy, sorry, I'm just pulling up the two different ones in front of me. And the proposed policy, right, it tells you that there won't be a warning, which has always been the case. I just sort of emphasized it in both versions of the revised old and the proposed new one. The device is confiscated. It goes to the office for the rest of the day. That's all the same, right? That's a logical consequence that they lose that. Certainly, if a student is leaving for an internship or a GCC class, that's the end of their day and they get it back. They cannot get it back because they're choosing to leave campus for lunch, though. That's not a reason to return the device. And then it gets written up into PowerSchool. The main difference in the proposed one, which is not listed as specifically in the old one, is that parents would be notified after the second violation. So that's a little bit earlier of a notification to families. And then it says a similar line about continued offenses, maybe resulting in being prohibited from school for a period of time. And we've done that in different ways previously. So sometimes that's a student checking their phone into the office for the day. That way they can pick it up at 2 p.m. for athletics after school. Or that could be sometimes a family choosing to keep it home entirely. Sometimes a family chooses to bring it to their kid at the end of the day. So we work with families around what's going to work for them and their student. If they get to the point where they have to lose the device for a period of time, then they lose it for a period of time. And then we try again. The main conduct piece that's different in the proposed policy has to do with a student refusing to turn it over. So previously, when a student refused to turn it over, we asked that the teacher send the student out of the class down to the office. And then if the student still wouldn't turn it over, then it ends up being a refusal to follow an adult directive, which has a consequence of an office detention for a first offense. And then that could continue on and so forth from there. And so here what we're looking at, again, is that PowerSchool referral for that, a communication home for that, and a corrective action in line with disciplinary consequences in the code of conduct. And then the next piece of that is an immediate loss of the device at school for a period of time. So that's the extra piece. Everything else is still the same. Like there's, likely an office detention, notifying the family, but then also saying you now cannot have this device for X amount of time. And then of course, if they bring that device via progressive discipline, that would just escalate the consequence from there. But hopefully that would not happen. But again, what I was saying before was that it was a problem where students would say, I'll just take the detention. I'm not giving you my phone. I'll take the detention. I keep my phone. And then they just move on. So we're trying to avoid that as what is becoming students' solution to not wanting to comply with the cell phone policy.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
April or Annie, I can't open them up, the policies. Can you just give me access? I requested
Are
it,
you
but
trying to use your personal email or the school one?
No, I'm on the school email. I think earlier I had requested on my personal, but this one I can't.
Okay.
Same.
Okay, it's not just me. I kind of forgot about it. So then when I tried again now, I was like, wait a minute.
I think while we're waiting for that, I'll just mention that I heard from a parent, I think Paul, that parent may have contacted you as well, about the consequences for students. And I think they were especially worried about the proposed state legislation, and that was passed by the Senate and is going to the House in the Massachusetts State House, and that those consequences seemed unduly harsh, and that we should, if anything, consider a transition to those consequences if that were to come to pass. And so I wanted to find out how it related to what the state is proposing for consequences, which I'm not steeped in the legislation, but if anyone wants to comment, I'd welcome that perspective.
So
I will say, I think
first-
the comment was about the proposed policy of going straight to, what did you call it? Students will not be given a warning. The teacher will request the device and it'll be confiscated with the first violation. I think there was a
Yeah.
concern about that, but I didn't
Just to
realize that
clarify,
that
though,
had been,
Yeah, it's not different.
that was the original practice. Yeah, I don't think that was known.
It was original policy. Some people had a more challenging time in the practice of that, right? Trying to give a kid the benefit of the doubt, which I understand, but unfortunately, again, that little bit ends up creeping up, right? Like, oh, I was just checking the time. Oh, I forgot this thing. Oh, my phone did
Right.
whatever. And it just, kind of continues. So I was just trying to emphasize
I see.
the harsher, just like, no. What I have told staff, I reminded them today, regardless of the decision tonight, is a proactive warning and setting of expectations is really important for kids. Like when they come into class, as a reminder, cell phones are often away. If you have your cell phone out, you won't be given a warning. I will collect your phone. You can get it again at the end of the day. Because some kids also refuse to hand it over because they don't know the own policy and they're afraid you're taking away their phone forever and you're going to do all these crazy things and they freak out. So just reviewing with them, right, those expectations and the consequences so there are no surprises. And so we talked about that again at today's staff meeting.
That was something that the parent also brought up, and actually a recommendation that the school committee requests seeing a communications plan around that, both from our administration to the educators and from the educators to the students. I think it's a really good idea. I think this is important enough that we need to get it right, so that we don't result in a whole bunch of unnecessary angst.
And Humera, just to your question, in case the public is wondering, so the policy, what the Senate is proposing, and as you said, the Senate has passed legislation, the House has not taken it up at this point. But the Senate has proposed that the policy that
Is that Annie or
I think it's Annie.
That was Annie.
Annie, go ahead.
Annie, can you repeat the last sentence?
Yeah, I'm sorry, was I not, you couldn't hear me?
You froze.
Yeah, you froze.
Okay. So what the Senate is proposing is that school districts have a policy that is bell to bell, off and away all day is what the Massachusetts State Senate would like to see in terms of consequences or rules about enforcing that policy. Their current language says the policy and any standards and rules enforcing the policy shall be prescribed by the school or district and approved by the school committee, which is what, April, what we're bringing to you today. So the state, at least the Senate's language and legislation, that the legislation doesn't indicate specific methods of enforcement, rules, or consequences, but simply says that in their legislation, every district will have off and away all day policy, and that the rules and consequences to enforce said policy will be approved by the school committee. And in the Senate's legislation, that every district will then file that with the state annually.
And to be in place by, when did they want all this in place by? Did it
The
state the date?
Senate's bill says, I believe, the 26-27 school year.
Right, so not this year, but next year.
That's the Senate's, what they passed.
Right, and the House isn't taking it up, so it definitely wouldn't affect this year.
I don't know if the House plans on nobody's taking anything up this month, and so they all
Right.
resume in September. I'll look right now what their hearing schedule is, just
Right.
give me a minute.
I just on that point, Humira, I just want to kind of throw in, based on kind of what I've heard and what I've seen at other districts, ones I've worked in and ones I haven't, is that the violations or the repercussions for the violations are pretty similar. I would say, given the last district I worked in, lighter than what I had to do with students. Just where, for example, if we got them with their phone, it was taken away and they couldn't get it back until a parent picked it up. And so sometimes that may result in a student without a phone for weeks at a time if a parent just didn't feel like coming to pick it up. So I think here we're being, I don't want to say generous, but I would say that I think we're being cognizant of the fact that, like, yes, they can get their phone at the end of the day, but it's been such a disruption during the day that that they need to have it withheld until the end of the day.
Not to disagree with you in any way, but to bring clarity to that. What about the number of fractions in the district you worked at versus Hadley? Just for clarity purposes, because if we're going to compare policies, like how many infractions were there versus here? Do you
A lot of cell phone violations. A lot of cell phone violations.
Right.
Yes, I mean it's a huge issue, and ultimately what it comes down to is policy and procedure. If I'm being honest, and if we can have a solid policy and we have procedures that teachers are following and kids kind of follow those rules, then I think it can be, I think it can work. But yeah, to answer your question.
Great, thank you, Ethan.
And it does say, so July 31st, the Massachusetts Senate passed the bill. On August 4th, the bill was sent to the House Ways and Means Committee for further consideration. That committee will review the bill. I can't see if it's set for hearing yet. And if they approve it, it'll go to the full Massachusetts House of Representatives for a vote.
Thank you, Amy.
What does that have to do with what we're discussing?
We were just talking about the timeline potentially for when something like this would hit, whether policy changes would at the state level would affect anything that we're doing here at the local level. That was the line of questioning that was had, and Annie was telling us the timetable. Do you have a question, Christine, other than that?
No, I guess more of a statement that this is something that we've been discussing for years.
Are we getting into deliberative mode, or are we still in questions of Ms. Camuso about the research and questions proposed?
No questions about no questions about the research.
Okay.
I don't have any
same
either.
here.
All right, we're moving into deliberation. Christine, please continue.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, it's something that we've been discussing for years, and I think that the teachers are the best gauge in what is right for their students and their classrooms, and I think that we should respect that and follow through. I think that it's overdue, and I think that there's going to be pushback, just like with anything else, but I think that the results and the benefits outweigh the pushback.
Thank you, Christine. And clearly your many years of teaching experience also give you a perspective that you bring to the table that can be articulated on behalf of other teachers. So thank you for sharing that. Who else would like to share?
I'm happy to share. I mean, I know I said last month that I think a stricter cell phone policy is the right move forward. I also just want to kind of reflect on the data. I felt like we were kind of getting in the weeds there a little bit with the data, but the way I look at it kind of from a more broader sense is that back in 21, when we first looked at the data to what we're seeing now, there's been a enormous shift in the feeling of cell phones in the schools from our teachers. And I think it's really important that we kind of take that to heart and recognize that cell phones have become more of an issue and they're not going to go away. And I know they said this last month, but I'll reiterate, it's not going to get any easier without better policy. I don't think that kids need their cell phones at all during the day. I think there's ways for them to communicate home. Obviously, if a teacher wants to use the cell phone, that's their prerogative. But I have been in schools, I've seen it work where if they don't have a cell phone, they're perfectly able to kind of move about the day. There's opportunities for them to communicate home via email, via the main office, or even as this policy states, to be able to use their cell phone in a certain situation if needed. But I just look at the data and I say, 4 or 5 years ago, teachers felt really comfortable with what we had in place, and the cell phone usage wasn't bad. And now we're looking at, 70-80% of the respondents saying, yes, it's a real issue. And I think we need to act instead of thinking that it's just going to get better if we all just say, put your phones away. Because these students aren't going to respond to that. I think the comments tonight showed in it. I think also something that I'd just like to share from being in the schools is that as the year goes on, you will see less discipline referrals because of teacher fatigue, because it's the same kids day in and day out doing these things. And at some point, the teachers are going to just kind of say, what else can I do? I've called home, I've communicated with the families, I've said how much of an issue it is, and still nothing's being done. So am I going to continue to do X number of write-ups, X number of work, when I know nothing's going to happen? So I think a stricter policy, better procedure is the best way forward.
Thank you, Ethan. Also noted that you too bring a wide perspective from the teaching community, being an educator yourself. So thank you for sharing that. Tara, Paul?
I had a question just before I share my thoughts. So when I look at the information for the rationale for policy change and we look year to year, we're not reporting it more. So teachers' feelings, from when we started to now are consistent, but we're not having higher numbers of reported. Am I reading it wrong, April? I just want to clarify because Ethan, you said it's getting worse, but and I understand there's fatigue, but maybe frustration is worse, but we're not having a ton more in the past 3 or 4 years. Am I correct in your numbers?
The percentages are slightly increasing over time. For us, a small percentage difference is, I guess I would say, large because we have small numbers.
Sure. Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't reading something incorrectly.
Right. It wasn't an overwhelming increase.
Right.
Can I also just bring up a point that this has more to do with focus and educational issues than it does just about discipline, and that we have to take into account what the experts are saying in terms of focus.
Thank you, Christine. Christine, do you want to, let's just let Tara just communicate her point of view first, and then we can talk about that. Because I definitely want to hear that perspective as well. Tara, go ahead.
Sure. So I had asked for the data to be brought to this meeting at our last meeting so that we could review all this. And the reason being is because my recollection when we talked about it years ago, teachers wanted the pouches, right? We wanted a stricter policy and we didn't do anything, right? And so then it went for years, we didn't do anything. And now we're back talking about it, okay? And so the data hasn't changed from when we talked about it then to when we talked about it now. There's no new relevant data over the past 1 to 2 years, research-wise, that's stating anything different than when we talked about it a few years ago, right? So that information, that research has not changed, at least to my knowledge and what we've been given. So when I look at this, and this is why I wanted to know kind of teachers' responses and the surveys from then to now, because we don't have any new information research-wise that's a light going off, we need to change this now, because I look at that from a parent's perspective and go, well, why now? Why didn't you change it then? Right? So we need some sort of our own data to track. Well, fine, the data hasn't changed from them. We made the decision in 2021-2022 school year not to change anything, but we've tracked our teachers, we've tracked our infractions, and this is what we've noticed locally. And while the research hasn't changed, it still remains the same. We're noticing a worsening, and now we want to change the way we're handling that. So I think it's really important to be able to provide our community with information as to why we're making the change now versus why we didn't then. Right? Because no new research has been made. And I would make the similar argument when we talk about change in high school times and shifting high school times or tiered busing, right? Like looking at all that, we're not having any new relevant information. So if we bring up that discussion, then if there's nothing new, we need to be able to support decisions that we're making that's beyond subjective. It needs to be more objective. In my opinion, we need to make more objective decisions. So that's why I find this really helpful. I was supportive years ago of a more strict cell phone policy. And it's mostly for the point that Christine brought up, right? Attention. It's not helping our students at all when they're distracted on a cell phone. And full disclosure, as a parent of a 6th grader who's now going into 7th grade, I'm actually more worried about his generation, the incoming 7th graders, and what it's going to be like for them in 12th grade. Okay. So when I look at the cell phone policy, I think, yeah, I want my son to have a stronger cell phone policy, because I got to tell you, fine, there's a place and a time for a cell phone. My son is becoming more independent. I want him to be able to reach me for whatever personal reasons. But I also notice the impact of it at home. Right. And when we're out in public, put the cell phone away, put the cell phone away, put that, so you're not using that right now. Go put it over there. Don't do this, don't do that. And I'm doing a lot of that myself at home. And I think there's a lot of parents, at least from the 6th grade level, that are coming into 7th grade that you're going to find are not going to be in disagreement with you, right? So changing it for these younger grades, I think, is way easier. That's an easy thing to do. The hard part, which is always a challenge for our district, right? It's on part of Annie's annual review, is that communication piece. It's always hard to do an exemplary rating on that, because now you're taking the 10th, 11th, 12th grade kiddos who have been used to having it for so long. And let's not talk about the kiddos, let's talk about the parents. The parents have had access to this. The parents had full communication. So it's a two-way street, right? It's not just the kids reaching out to the parents are reaching out to the kids. So I think that the communication piece, when it comes to the high schoolers in particular, is really important. So I think it's great that we implement something at the school level where teachers are reinforcing it with students, but I feel very strongly that we need to be able to inform our parents, our families, right? The families of these children, why we're making this change. And we're not doing it because I'm frustrated as Miss Fitzgibbons having to tell that student all the time. No, I'm your teacher, and I want to make sure you're getting the most out of your classroom. I want to make sure you're learning the information. I want to make sure that when you leave high school, you're able to function in society without needing to use your cell phone 24/7. So I think the rationale as to how we present this to parents is important, and to the community is important. I don't know, is there a way to kind of ease them into it in the high school? I mean, 7th and 8th grade, all for it. Just throw those kids in. You don't get it, get used to it till you're graduated, because they're not used to any different. But I feel like there needs to be some sort of approach for the older kiddos, for the family as a whole. Like, how do we bring this up? How do we present it to them? Because I don't feel like it can be, this is the policy change, you're going to get in trouble. That's it. End of story. Like, there needs to be some further communication about it.
A communications plan.
Yeah.
For parents, for students,
Yes.
and a strategy that nudges behavior change in the positive direction rather than this being a punitive
non-punitive
thing.
Right.
All right. Other comments? Christine, I know you were mid-sentence about focus. I'd welcome you to share that perspective. And also, we haven't heard from Paul.
Well, actually, Annie has her hand up. Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'll wait until the school committee is finished. That's
All right,
I'll wait.
Annie, you can put your hand down. I could call on you afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure that we were, as much as we were looking at the effect it was having on behavior, and on referrals, that, we were also thinking about, well, what's actually best for the students in terms of their education. And there is data to show that, the loss of focus, the amount of time spent on the phone, the cyberbullying that goes on, it all is a detriment to our students. So, I just wanted to make sure that, we were just talking about not just the consequences, but the benefits of the cell phone policy, and that it will positively affect the learning process. And yeah, it's going to be a struggle, but it'll be worth the benefits. So that's
Thank
all.
you, Christine. Thank you. Paul, would love to hear from your perspectives.
Give me a second. My fire alarm's going off.
Yep, no problem.
Can I just jump in while we're,
Of course. Yes.
I'm gonna take Paul's spot. I do love this conversation, and it's something that I'm constantly thinking about. I just want to say this because it is something that runs through my mind a lot when I talk to parents about cell phones, and their use into school. We are losing significant amounts of time on learning, because we are policing kids on their cell phones while they play on social media and text their friends and family. Like, that's really what we're getting. That's what we're talking about here. If you were to tell me that the kids were doing something educational on their phones, I'm all in, right? And there's plenty of opportunities to do that. But what teachers are having to do is ask kids to put their phones away, not because they're doing something educational, but because they're distracting themselves by doing something on social media or communicating with family and friends. That's really what's at the heart of this. And it's hard for me to think that putting their phones away wouldn't improve the academic experience of all students. Also, the opportunity for teachers to be able to teach in the way they want to without being distracted time and time again. And I know that's kind of a large statement, but that's, to me, where we're at with the conversation we're really having.
Thank you, Ethan. Welcome back, Paul. I hope that's not a fire.
Yeah, no, thanks. I don't know what it was. It's gone now.
Okay.
I appreciate the conversation. It's been a really good conversation. It's kind of nice to be one of the last speakers to hear all the different perspectives. Couple of things I'll just say. So I agree with Tara's point that she made early on, that it would be helpful to have sort of a set number of questions that we ask consistently. Just, this is somewhat of an experiment, right? To see how things change over time. So I think that's a great point. Tara, I guess I do see consistency in the data, right? If you look at the 2021, 2022 question of 28 staff people, whether they agreed that we should use those Yondr pouches, 93% said we should. I can't remember exactly why we didn't, but maybe we should have then. And now you have 79% of staff of respondents saying that cell phone use is a problem. So obviously, I think we need to act. I'm hearing from the teachers, value a lot of what Ethan and Christine are saying, folks that have real life experience, which I don't. But I can imagine, as the father of former teenage boys, I share the pain, Tara, of regulating phone use. So I had walked in here thinking, because I had communicated to Mara with that same parent, and I thought it was a really helpful comment that person made about, well, maybe we do ease into this and not be punitive from the start. But it was helpful for me, April, to hear, no, that in fact has been our policy all along. It just hasn't been implemented as such. So I'm for the proposed revisions to the handbook. I'm for this communication plan, as Humira and Tara said, because I do think that's the key here, is to make sure everybody's clear about the rules. I don't think it's a big, honestly, I don't think it's a big ask to say to people, you can't have it in class, you can't have it while you're walking the halls. I think it's probably just a whole lot easier just to say it's off and it's in your backpack. If you need it, it's there, but for the most of the day, you're not going to need it, and you need special permission to pull it out. I'm sure that's going to make things just a lot cleaner for folks. So I'm assuming we get a good communication plan and that's all clear before school starts, which I know is coming up, right, to folks. Because I bet there's going to be confusion, and as folks have said, there's going to be a lot of questions. So maybe there's some way we have a Q&A session, or some way we make that more clear, because I do think there's going to be some interest here. But I'm for one consistent policy from middle school to Hopkins that is easiest to implement, and value a lot of what Ethan and Christine and the other teachers have said about how that'll make the school situation better for a learning environment.
Can I tack on to something Paul just said?
Yes, Tara.
You know, when we were in COVID, we did have, and maybe I'm opening up a can of worms and subjecting ourselves to something that we don't want to do. But we did have open sessions where we had parents come and we were able to answer questions and provide rationales. That's not a bad idea if we can pull something off for I know school starts in 2 days, but still something, close to the beginning of the school year, that allows people to understand. It can be Q&A, it can be FAQs that are given out to people, it can be research that has been done that backs up why we're making these changes. It might be helpful. And I did agree, Paul, with the data too that April presented. It was that we had no new research, and we didn't act years ago, but we're acting now. So we need to be able to provide that. That's why that information is helpful. It gives us justification now that we can say we didn't, but now we've been tracking it for years, and here's what we've found. It hasn't gotten any better for teachers. So now we're enacting on it. What we tried wasn't working. So I think it's easier to be able to rationalize and explain that to people, why there's going to be this change. And part of it's out of our hands. Part of it is completely out of our hands. Going to have to make a change no matter what. We might as well implement it in a thoughtful way. I did have one question before we wrap up. Something struck me when April was talking, and I know that maybe there's not a single student in the high school that doesn't have a cell phone, but I also would never want to have a teacher utilize a cell phone as a means of education if they don't have a cell phone. So I'm assuming that there's a way to do that with their computers that they get one-on-one. And then a follow-up to that is children are way more resourceful in technology than I am. maybe some of you too. So what do we have in place on our technology now that, half the time my 12-year-old is showing me how to do something. What do we have in place, right? So like a form of communication that I use at work is Teams, and we talk all day long. So what do we do? So Google has Google Chat. Do we disable that? Are we using it to a certain extent? Has this just become another form of monitoring for teachers while they're talking back and forth on their computer? So I guess just something to think about, how that might impact if a student feels frustrated that they don't have their phone. What other means are they going to try to utilize? Just keeping in mind, with a computer, there's still access to communication.
Okay, thank you, Tara. Annie, you had your hand raised.
I did, just because, Tara, I think you asked a really good question. Has the body of research changed in any significant way since you initially talked about Yonder? I think that's a great question. I think it's a question the public would ask. I would just point to 2 major pieces of research or recommendations from Health and Human Services that came out. We discussed Yonder in July of 2022. It wasn't until September of that year that the National Institutes of Health published their research talking about the deleterious effects of cell phone use on adolescents and social media on adolescents and on their cognition. And the Surgeon General report, which I think is really important that people should acknowledge, that the Surgeon General came out in 2025, saying this is a no-go. Like, we should really be looking at the effects of social media and cell phones. So to your point, Tara, there was a conversation, and that's an excellent point of, are people going to ask, well, what's shifted? Those are just two majors that I think about. Information that you did not have in front of you when you had this discussion in July of 2022. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments?
Annie, can you just provide us that? Because I looked up before at the last meeting and I didn't find anything more recent. And so I would like to be able to have that in my pocket should I be asked that question.
Certainly. So what I'll do now is link to the agenda, the NIH report, and also in the handbook, if I'm not mistaken, April, I shouldn't make you take away from Penelope, that little sweetie. You actually link the Surgeon General's report, if I'm not mistaken, in the handbook. Or am I?
Yeah, that's correct. It's in the handbook.
It's in the handbook. So that has been in the handbook since its first presentation, and happy to provide the NIH information.
Thank you.
Annie, I think we've heard multiple different committee members request the importance of the communications plan, and time is of urgence if this is what we're going to implement in a couple of days. So I recognize that in 2 days, the students will be on campus and parents will be sending their kids off to school. So within the next day, like the next business day, can we pull together the scaffold of a communications plan? You must already have one, having clearly anticipated being thoughtful in communications to students, direct from the district, from the principal, direct from teachers, and also what communications parents will get. And I think it's also going to be really important to have a communications strategy when it comes to infractions, because there will be a lot more infractions initially, and there'll be a lot more parent interactions. So anticipating that that's going to be a potential situation, how we intend to handle that. Is that something that we can get a sense of before school begins?
I think I can try now again. April, I just want you to be able to bounce Penelope on your lap. And if anything I say deserves a big flag on the field, you or anyone else can say, no, that wouldn't work. So always standard ways of communicating about the handbook, emails and communication from the principal. Of course, students and parents are expected to sign off on the handbook after it's completed and voted on. In advisory, I understand that. I'm just saying that people are expected to read it. That is an expectation, and it is wise for parents to read it, particularly when it comes to rights under behavior, under special education, and under communication. That is not the only way I'm recommending that we communicate with families, but it's important that I remind families that you are signing something that says you understand the content and the consequences for transgressing against what's in the handbook. But in addition to that, I know that there are advisories that are scheduled beginning of school. I do believe that it was already expected as a part of advisory that every advisory teacher would be going over any significant changes to school district policy, which for the students is primarily has to do with behavior. I am more than happy to work with April around her schedule, or simply for myself to host the virtual Q&As with any parents who have questions about what the policy is, why, and how it will be implemented, what they can expect, and where they might be able to find support from other parents in terms of enforcing, or just in general, what resources they might turn to. So certainly, because some of the things that I heard mentioned, I'm happy to schedule and host Q&As. I know that April emails students and families regularly, and parents, I believe, have access to the student email. I believe she sends that, her weekly email, to students, to parents every week. Advisories, students, the advisory teachers take students through changes in school policy. And of course, parents and students sign off on receipt of the handbook. I'm also open to any other suggestions that people have, should the school committee decide this is the direction they'd like to go in.
I'd like to comment on something. So I know parents are signing off on it, but if parents have also been in the district for a few years, maybe somebody who's a little bit, has a 7th grader coming in might be a little bit more diligent. And I think it's also important, kind of like we have, weekly highlights from you, Annie, to point out any major changes. So as we send it to them, and maybe this is what you intended, and I apologize if that's what you meant. But when we send it to them, letting them know they need to read through and sign off on it, alerting them to any major changes so that they know to pay particular attention. If they're skimming through it, they note that change.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tara. I think that this can't be something that for many parents will be buried in the text and they'll be overlooked. And we want positive behavior change to occur. We want to onboard people in a sort of a smooth way. I think there has to be a very specific email that goes out on this topic alone, not buried amongst other topics, both to students as well as to parents, possibly from different messengers. I just think that we should plan to be really proactive about this. That's what I'm listening for.
I agree. I really do. Because I feel like that's the best way to let teachers start off for a good year. And teachers aren't getting emails going, what the heck? Because it was really clearly laid out. I'd like to take it off of their plate. And it comes from outside of their. It makes sense to me.
Yeah. So I heard, in addition to the regular, perhaps with the handbook, we could add the summary of changes. In addition to that, a standalone email to students and to families regarding changes in cell phone policy. Also, reminders within existing updates regarding the cell phone policy, invitation to a virtual Q&A meeting for parents. And as I said, teachers reviewing changes in policy at start of year advisories. Is there anything else the school committee would like to see, assuming that they vote for the revision of policy?
And how have the other schools in the area handled this? Have they adopted similar policies?
Yeah, most of them are off and away bell to bell. Not all, there's some who aren't, but the majority of my colleagues are off and away bell to bell. Okay. Either through Yonder Patches or just the policy.
Okay, thanks.
I haven't seen it necessarily in the majority. This is through my statewide role. But it could, we could just be mingling amongst different people. One of the things that I would like to see, this may or may not pass at the state level. If it doesn't, I would like to evaluate how we've done a year from now and to understand what's changed, understand infractions, I'd like to see it capture of engagement increasing, learning outcomes increasing, all those things that we hope will happen. I want to keep my mind open about how we are or are not supporting safe technology use in our schools. So I don't want this to be a fait accompli. I would like to have us continue to analyze how it's going. Any final thoughts, comments, or questions before we take a vote on this?
I'd actually like to bring this back up in a future meeting to hear an update on thoughts. If maybe it doesn't have to be something formal, or maybe it is where we do another survey, whatever Annie and April feel. And that can be kind of that continuity of information, Humira, where we know it kind of how is the beginning of the year going versus the end of the year, and then get an update on that data just so that we kind of know where teachers stand. And I think it's something that you're right, we shouldn't let fall to the wayside and let it sit for a few years and then come back to it. We should be keeping track.
Yeah, you're being much more eloquent about exactly what was on my mind. So I think like I would actually like to see this a year from now, ideally in July versus August, to understand, how it went.
Yeah.
Yeah. Annie, can you please make note? Thank you. All right. Any other final thoughts or comments? Okay. So do I hear a motion to accept the cell phone adjustments to the handbook as presented?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, everyone. That was a really great discussion. And I'm looking forward to hearing how that goes in terms of implementation this next week and 2 weeks, month, actually. Okay. Moving on to presentation and discussion item E, superintendent updates. Annie, what do you want to highlight for us?
So the governor's office has approved our budget for our evidence-based practices grant. This grant provides funding to support inclusive practices such as co-teaching. That grant is a $100,000 annual award, so we're grateful to the governor's office for approving the budget and for DESE to awarding us. DESE has also approved a continuation of our hate crimes prevention activities, a $20,000 grant. We are awaiting final approval from the governor's office, and Hopkins Academy earned the status again this year of best high schools in U.S. News and World Report. Also, I appeared on, I'm doing that WHMP monthly show on the radio, and the discussion the week of August 11th, there's a link to that. And I was asked questions about them on the decision. So if that interests the school committee or members of the public, it is there the week of August 11th.
Thank you, Annie. Any questions for Annie about her updates?
Annie, yeah, just a quick one, Annie. The last one about the 412 application. Can you give me like the easier explanation of their feedback?
Yes, and sadly, so they liked the proposal because they said it doesn't align with this, but please apply for this grant over here. Fun fact, I was told that on Wednesday. That other grant was due Friday at 5 p.m. I wrote it, and then I heard from someone else who said, oh gosh, just seeing this now, as I referenced in the email, you're not eligible. But it was a great activity to rewrite it for the new proposal in under 48 hours, and no, we're not eligible. But good news that they liked the concept, the initial concept, and now I just have to find a funding stream that is better aligned with that. It was a great.
I'm sorry you had to do more work. That's no.
And I thought you did a great job on that radio interview.
Yeah.
You were very diplomatic.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah.
Can one ask though? Next time, can you have 3 pairs of glasses?
Oh my gosh, what is with that? Okay, yes. Okay.
All right, terrific. Thank you. You're a natural, Annie. Way to go in spreading your awesomeness through the radio mechanism, and great that others are learning from your example and our example. All right, we are moving on to presentation discussion item F, Business Manager Report. Chris, are you here with us? And can you take us through your items?
Sure. So tonight I only have one financial report for you. It's the revolving accounts report. And basically the only reason I'm bringing this up is because there were some pretty good sized changes from the June. We were missing some deposits, et cetera. And so I wanted to just kind of give an update as to where we are now. And as you can see from the report, the balances are much more healthy now than they were at the end of June. So, $70,000 in the lunch account is really nice, 55 in the preschool. And school choice, as you can see, took a nice step forward as well. So that's certainly helpful for us to have, without a doubt. And I just wanted to kind of highlight that, these rebounded nicely over the last month of the year. So I don't know if anyone has any questions on that.
Any questions for Chris on the revolving account? Okay, seeing none, let's continue.
Okay, so the next one is the ESCO. That went live last week. I had a mandatory walkthrough today for anyone interested in submitting an RFQ for this project. Train was the only one who showed up for the mandatory meeting. So I did send out 2 packages. I'm not sure if the other one was kind of an organization that gathers all bid documents, I think, for their members or something. And so it's entirely possible they just grab everything, and there was, none of their members were interested in it. But we did the walkthrough today. They took a lot of pictures and a lot of notes, and the RFQ is due in a couple of weeks. And what we will do is, the plan was to review all of the RFQs, to interview the applicants, and bring forward a kind of a recommendation to the school committee at their next meeting. We won't probably be doing much comparing of RFQs, since we only had one company show up today. But be that as it may, at least we had someone there. And like I said, I mean, they could definitely see there was a significant amount of room for improvement, without a doubt. So it'll be interesting to see what they propose.
Terrific. Thank you, Chris. Look forward to seeing what they propose.
Athletic fields update. The only thing Paul may have an update a little later, so I don't want to steal his thunder. I just wanted to mention to everyone, I kind of linked the final version of the sign here. I'm just waiting for the quote from the sign company before we have them install it at the field. So I just wanted to fill you in on that.
Great, thank you.
And the last thing we have here is the updated timeline for the locker room project. This was requested at the last meeting, so I did reach out to the designers. Basically, what we're looking at here, I went with the high side. I personally don't see them all taking, 3 to 4 weeks. I mean, 8 to 12 weeks, that's a month difference, so I don't necessarily see it taking 8 to 12 weeks, but I'm sure they put that range in case all of a sudden there's some problem that's discovered or something. And so I took the high sides just with my total, and it's 23 weeks, which is a little less than 6 months. Some of the items at the end, like punch list, that's basically walking through when it's done and looking at things that we don't quite feel measured up. So that's a whole month in itself right there. Commissioning, again, they called it 2 weeks for that. If you look at the main section of the work, mobilization can be done basically before school ends, or I mean, that's all done basically on their own time. But so we're looking at basically 3 to 4 months of work with demo and construction. So as far as the messiest work, obviously the demo would be the one that created the most dust, and they're going to be breaking things up and hauling them out of the building, and so there will be dust, no doubt about it. And there will be obviously noise and dust with the construction too, not probably as messy as the demo, but nevertheless it will be. On top of this, just so the bid would take about a month. We have to keep it out there for a couple of weeks, and then we collect the bids, and of course the school committee would have to approve it in the end. So we're looking at a month, depending on when it would actually start. We have to wait for scheduled meetings and stuff like that. But so that would be in addition to this, but again, not really part of the project. So this is basically what was requested at the last meeting. Our question to you at that time was, is this something you want to get all of the initial stuff done during the school year and hit the ground running in the summer, or do you want to start it now? If we were to start it now, we would probably be having you approve it at your October meeting and then going from there. So, I can certainly answer any questions you may have, but this is what we're looking for.
Chris, I have a question, and then I'd love to hear from some of my other colleagues on this as well. But based on the 3 to 4 month timeframe of construction, it seems to me like demolition taking place right after graduation makes sense. Our biggest school need of the building before it kind of, hibernates for the summer, perhaps, or has fewer occupants at least. And if it's going to seep into any part of the school year, it would be better for it to seep into the fall, perhaps, where there are outdoor sports, or the spring. But the spring represents a time when there are many more inhabitants in the school. So for that reason, it seems like graduation time, post-graduation would be the best start time for that, and potentially seeping into the fall, but trying to contain how much it seeped into the actual start of the school year. And based on that, you could probably backwards calculate the time it will take to put out the bid to actually have the, whatever on-ramping there needs to be before acceptance of the bid and the actual beginning of the project. And if that were the case, to me, it doesn't make sense to start in the fall for something that's going to be starting actual time, to bid, accept, and begin work until sometime in the spring. But maybe I'm not seeing all the things. Is there a specific aspect of this that, remind me again how it relates to our town meeting and getting funding approved, and whether that's fall town meeting or spring town meeting?
Well, the funding's already been approved for this project. So, we don't really have to work around the town meetings. It would really just be disturbing, I guess, for lack of a better term, the quiet of the school, having that kind of work going on during the school year.
Right.
If we were to begin work after graduation, we would probably go out to bid in February or March, and that way we could award the contract. If we went out to bid in February, we could award the contract at your March meeting, and that would allow the vendor to order the supplies in April and May. So you wouldn't have any lead time, because there's going to be a month or so lead time to get some of this equipment in.
Right.
And so that would kind of take that right out of the picture, where it could just start to be accumulated before the year starts. That would save some time as well.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question? Are we talking
course.
about starting the project before all of the students are gone? Because I feel like the conversation last month was around not doing any of the demolition work while the students were there because of the dust. I'm just trying to understand the timeline, right?
Yeah,
So I assume we'd begin
That's-
after the students left for the year?
Right, that's what I was just talking about the, graduation would occur, students and teachers would be out of the building. There's hardly any summer activities taking place. That would be
Right.
the best time for construction to begin, the demolition part at least. But the process that Chris would start would begin in February in
For sure.
terms of yes.
And maybe I'm in the weeds. I just know that graduation happens and then there's a couple of
Right.
weeks left where students are still
Right.
there. And so I just wanted to clarify for anyone that might be listening that we wouldn't start right after graduation because there would still be 80% of the students in the building.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
right. Of
a
course.
better way.
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm sorry.
No, of course, it would be after the
Yes.
last day of school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Perfect.
Yes, yep. Any other questions or comments for Chris about this? Anyone feel like earlier than February is something that we have to start? Or do we feel like February is the right time frame?
I'd say as long as Annie and Chris are comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
Yeah.
I feel like Chris knows the best timelines.
Yeah.
I just don't want to push it out any further. Like, let's start
Right.
this summer and get this thing
Yeah.
done. Like,
Well, and also
Let's
let's verify, especially with import taxes and tariffs and delays, that locker rooms aren't all of a sudden going to be like a 3-month delay thing. Just find out from the partners that you're working with that there's no question you'll be able to get the materials that you need. Because if there was a question, then perhaps we should begin the process of scoping out the vendor this fall. And if there's no downside, I haven't heard a downside yet, except, there's hierarchy of challenges to work on.
Yeah, I can reach out to them. You know, as you know, things change almost daily on what's happening in the world. So it's a tough one to know, you know, if there would be problems down the road or tomorrow even. But they might have a little more, you know, their ear to the ground on this kind of thing than we do. So I'll reach out to them and find out.
And based on that, Chris, if you could come back with a recommendation about when we should just begin the bidding process. If there, I mean, if there's no harm in beginning the bidding process, perhaps in the fall, when maybe more vendors are looking as they go into the winter to, you know, make sure they have their nuts squirreled away for the winter, for the long winter, or, you know, just that they have some cash flow coming in, then maybe it makes sense for us to approve the plan and for you to begin in October, November, the process of finding the vendor that we're going to use it.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend starting that early, only because we have to get prevailing wage sheets for the project, which are good for 6 months. So if we go out to bid in October, they're using existing prevailing wage sheets from that point in time, then they're going to expire in April before the project actually starts. And, you know, it's tough for them to try to build that in, you know.
Right. So we're really looking at end of January, beginning of February.
Yeah, if we went out to bid in February, you know, 6 months from there would be, I guess, the end of August. They'd be kind of wrapping up at least
Right.
a lot of the construction work at that point in time.
That makes sense. Well, thank you for that update. There's nothing to vote on, but I think we have pretty good guidance, and we look forward to hearing from you next month about what they say about lead times.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Great. And then let's see, we are on, I think that's it for your updates. Thank you, Chris. We're going to move on to item G, donor recognition and the Hopkins Academy athletic fields. Annie, we were talking about this just a moment ago, reviewing the naming of facilities policy. And I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at it, but it's a policy that's pretty, I feel like it's pretty specific in some respects. Like there is a process people need to propose what they want renamed, and there has to be a requester or submitter. There's so I'm asking Annie to please take the lead on designing a procedure that accompanies this process so that we can actually have something to react to in writing from a certain requester with a certain rationale that we can review and comment on. I'm also asking her to look at the scope of the policy as it reads right now. I could come in and like decide that I want to name the gazebo Humera's Gazebo. And, you know, I could put that in writing and you guys have a month to, you know, sort of like put it out there. And if no one objects, then it's called Humera's Gazebo at Hopkins Academy, or perhaps it's Humera's Academy. You just, where does it end? So anyone can put a request for naming anything. I think that we just need to think about what we're putting out there and refine this a bit. But I also look forward to seeing the procedure that should accompany this policy, and then we can publish that and actually get a proposal to review. Any questions? Okay. We are moving into action items. We have already approved item A, the Mahmood decision. We've approved the preschool handbook, the HES handbook, the Hopkins Academy handbook. Do I hear a motion to approve the payroll and expense warrants for July 2025?
So moved.
Thank you, Christine.
Seconded.
Thank you, Ethan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. And do I hear a motion to approve the school committee minutes of June 30 and July 21, 2025?
So moved.
Thank you, Paul.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, terrific. School committee updates and general announcements. Tara, take us through any updates on the playground, CPAC, and CES.
The playground has its surfacing. So if you have no reason to go to the elementary school, make that be your reason, and go jump around on it. We had kiddos there yesterday for the PTO Marsh. We had a fantastic turnout. And a lot of people seemed really excited that the parents' feet weren't getting covered in wood chips and there weren't wood chips being thrown. I did have one student ask me why we did get rid of the wood chips because they were better. Beyond that, everybody was very happy. So thank you, Chris, for all your hard work and making sure that got completed. So it looks lovely and it feels lovely. So check it out if you haven't. CPAC, the only thing being the summer and the start of the school year coming up, did also actually make a presence at the PTO Marsh yesterday. So I feel like that's a good, strong start for them, starting the year out, having a presence be there. So I'm excited to see what they do for the school year. CES, so there's a focus group that just completed up that has decided on a hiring agency that will be approved in the September meeting for that agency to go out and start interviewing for a new director for the CES. So more to come in September or October, depending on where our meeting falls.
Great. Thank you so much, Tara. On finance, I can report that there are no updates. There was actually an override meeting that was hosted by the select board. And I wonder if any of my colleagues or Annie went to that or what you've heard from the override public meetings.
Yes,
Anything to
so-
inform the public about?
Sure. I believe that the town sent out an email today reminding folks that the vote is on September 9th, is at Hopkins Academy. Oh my gosh, here we are at 7 p.m. Also, so I strongly encourage the public. I think it's relatively easy to sign up to messages, either email or text from Hadley, from the government. So I get these through town hall. Special town meeting to vote on the override Tuesday, September 9th at 7 p.m. Also, they have links to all 4 of the information sessions regarding the override forums. So, and I'm certain that if anybody wanted to sign up now, you could ask town hall, or certainly anyone in the public can email me. I'm happy to forward this to members of the public if they would like a copy of the update in town.
Also, the actual vote on September 9th is on whether or not the question is to go forward and to be voted on by ballot. So it makes the most sense to really get people to go and vote, to push this forward so that then everybody can have a say in whether or not we pass the 2.5.
Got it. So it's not voting for the 2.5, it's voting
Right.
to put it on the ballot so that the people
Right.
of Hadley have the say.
Yes.
Got it. Very good. Thank you. Shardul, I noticed that you're present with us. Your announcements are later, but your topics relate to the Finance Committee. So I welcome you to unmute yourself and share anything you want to about that or the finance topic.
No, Christine said it perfectly, that this is a vote to move this forward to the ballot. And I think these forums have been great. A lot of great questions about why we're in the situation and how we kind of get out of it and work towards dealing with kind of the new paradigm in terms of expenses, and especially with the health insurance increases, causing a lot of these increases, and some of the other things that have happened in terms of some services that were being paid for by stabilization and now need to be put towards the budget. And so it's a difficult situation, but again, if anybody has any questions for me, let me know. The forums, I don't believe there's any more forums left. I think all the forums have been completed, but
And their recordings are online, I imagine, because some of them are hybrid.
Yeah, all the recordings I believe are online, and
Terrific.
and there's joint select board and finance committee meetings also that do provide some level of guidance and other insight into it.
Great, thank you. So just as a reminder to the viewing public, if you want to learn more about the override and why the town of Hadley is considering it and what this vote that you would cast means, then please go to TV5 and search for the last several public forums, as well as the joint select board and finance committee meetings.
And I'll just underscore, public can also feel free to email me, and I'm happy to forward to you one email with a copy of the warrant and all 4 of the recordings in one place that the town put together.
Great, thank you, Annie. Thank you, Shardul. Okay, we're moving on to fields, and Chris alluded to a potential news related to the fields. Paul, is there something to share?
Still work that needs to be done. Folks have been out there under some wet conditions. There's still some drainage challenges on the varsity baseball field. We're working to get that addressed. Appreciate everybody's patience. I heard some unhappy folks, but it's a really tricky site, as we've said all along, and we're really close. There's also potentially some reseeding to be done, but we're getting close. So it's not finalized. We know there's drainage challenges, and we're working on it.
Thank you, Paul. Please keep us apprised, especially as we enter the fall season and folks are out there for soccer, what the implications are and what the plan is. Thanks.
Gotcha.
All right, moving to capital. Christine, is there anything to know?
No, nothing to report.
Okay, great. And on the policy end, Ethan? You're on mute.
Almost made it. We met this afternoon and did a second reading of a couple of policies that we looked at earlier this summer, and began looking at some new policies around bidding and expense reimbursement. So we're back at it, and we'll be bringing more to the table next month.
Great, thank you. General announcements. We don't have the select board. Do we have a select board liaison to the school committee identified yet? No, Annie says. Okay, we'll stay tuned for that. And Shardul, were there any other updates to make? Nope.
I don't believe so. I think one question that I did have is regarding the fields. I think there was work, I guess, ongoing drainage work. Is that expected to be in excess or additional cost, or is that within the scope of the work of the current contractor?
No, the current contractor is almost done, so there'll be additional costs to get that. And I think it's been out to bid, so we're waiting on pricing in 2 to 3 weeks.
And
sorry.
and where those funds would come is still TBD, Shardul. We're not sure what the size of that will be, whether we'll come to the town for that, or whether we'll, what other method we might have for solving that.
Okay, just curious. I guess what was there some type of unknown condition that caused this drainage issue? I'm just wondering, because usually, like when we're doing site work, that's all included in the scope of work that we do for our construction. So just trying to understand kind of what created this condition, this drainage issue.
It's a floodplain, and we're restricted as to how much we can modify the site based on state regulations. So it's a very tight site, and so they install. We basically need to install another drainage system right in that area. It wasn't designed. It was under designed, honestly. So we need to put in more drainage right there.
Now, is the engineering company that designed it, are they
We could talk about the Shardul if you want. I'd be happy. You want to get into details. I know you got background on this. We can bring in Chris, who's been managing this contract, but it's been going on for years, right? We've progressed, we get close, we then target another problem. There was a problem behind home plate. We solved that. Now there's a problem in the outfield. So we're getting close.
Okay.
Happy to chat
All
with
right.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the offer, Paul, of connecting with Shardul, and it would be great to go over the whole backstory and all that we've how we've tried to work around this issue. But thank you for continuing to see it through. I mean, say Rome wasn't built in a day. I mean, our athletic fields definitely weren't built in 1 or 2 years. I mean, this is going to be a work in progress, but the important part is that we're not taking our eye off the ball. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, our next meeting dates are September 22nd at 5:30. That's the regular school committee meeting. The policy subcommittee will be meeting 1 hour beforehand. We are not meeting in executive session. So do I hear a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Second.
And is there a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.